The sharp metallic clink of a silver spoon tapping a crystal champagne glass pulled me out of the dark. I blinked, taking a sudden, shallow breath. My hands weren't tied to a hospital bed. The smell of copper and bleach was gone. Instead, the sweet, heavy scent of expensive white lilies and vintage wine filled my lungs. I looked down at my hands. They were smooth, pale, and completely unblemished. Resting on my left ring finger was a massive, brilliant-cut diamond ring that caught the glow of the chandelier above. October 14th. I knew this room. I knew the warm golden glow of the grand ballroom at the Stafford estate. I knew the hushed chatter of the city's highest elite mingling around the velvet-covered tables. Most of all, I knew the exact second my life had been destroyed. I hadn't just survived. I had come back. 3 years back to the exact night my world turned to ash. "Marina, are you even listening to me?" The voice was soft, laced with a delicate tremble that had once made my heart ache with sympathy. I turned my head slowly to look at my stepsister, Regina. She was dressed in a shimmering silver gown that clung to her frame, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She looked fragile, like a porcelain doll about to break. Right beside her stood Alfredo Stevenson, my fiancé. His dark suit was immaculate, his jaw set in a tight, bitter tone that echoed in the quiet corner of the VIP lounge. He stepped forward, putting a protective arm around Regina. She instantly leaned into his side, letting out a tiny, pitiful sob. In my past life, this was the exact moment I lost my mind. In my past life, Regina had just accused me in front of Alfredo's family and our board members of forging financial documents, claiming I had tried to drain Stevenson Global's offshore accounts and frame her for the theft. Back then, I had panicked. I had screamed, cried, and begged Alfredo to look at the paperwork, desperately trying to prove my innocence. My frantic terror had only made me look guilty, crazy, and dangerous. Alfredo called off the engagement on the spot, stripped me of my position, and handed everything over to Regina. And 2 years later, when their company began to drown in hidden debts, they made sure I took the fall for that, too. "Look at her, Alfredo," Regina whimpered, dabbing the corner of her eye with a lace handkerchief. "She isn't even denying it. Marina, how could you do this to our family? How could you try to ruin Alfredo's legacy and put my name on those fake audit files?" "I gave you everything, Marina," Alfredo said, his eyes flashing with self-righteous anger. "I trusted you with my family's name, but you're greedy. You couldn't bear seeing Regina get any recognition in the company, so you tried to sabotage us both." Several guests at the nearby tables began to turn, whispering behind their silk hand fans and wine glasses. The trap was set. They were waiting for the show. They were waiting for me to break. I took a slow breath and looked at them. Really looked at them. Alfredo's arrogant, puffed-up chest, Regina's subtle, triumphant smirk hiding beneath her fake tears. In my past life, I thought Alfredo was my savior. Now, all I saw was a weak man who needed someone else to blame for his own failures. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't even raise my voice. Instead, I reached into my small evening clutch, pulled out a silk napkin, and calmly wiped a stray drop of red wine off my wrist. "Are you finished?" I asked softly. Regina's sob instantly caught in her throat. She blinked, thrown off by how quiet I was. Alfredo frowned, clearly unsettled by the lack of panic on my face. "What did you say?" Alfredo snapped. "I asked if you were finished," I repeated, my voice smooth and clear enough to carry across the nearest tables. "You've made your speech, you've played the hero, and she's played the victim. So, is there anything else you need to get off your chest? Marina, this isn't a joke, Alfredo hissed, stepping closer, his face turning red. I'm breaking off our engagement tonight. I'm taking away your access to the corporate accounts, and I'm handing the lead management role to Regina. She's the only one who actually cares about my family. Regina looked up at him with wide, adoring eyes, but her gaze flicked toward me, searching for the breakdown she had planned for. She wanted me on my knees. She wanted me begging. I looked down at the massive diamond ring on my finger, the symbol of the cage I had willingly walked into the first time around. Without a word, I reached down, pulled the ring off my finger, and held it up between two fingers. Marina, what are you doing? Regina whispered, her eyes locking onto the jewel. If you want him, Regina, you can have him, I said quietly, and if you want his company, you can have that too. Before Alfredo could react, I dropped the ring straight into his glass of champagne. Plop. The pale gold bubbles fizzed wildly around the rock as it sank straight to the bottom. Alfredo froze, his mouth hanging open in complete disbelief. Marina, are you insane? I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, I said, stepping right past him. I stopped right beside Regina, leaning in just close enough so only she could hear me. Take good care of him, sister. Every single bit of him is yours now. I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't look back at the shocked faces of the guests or the red, furious flush spreading across Alfredo's neck. I picked up my clutch, turned my back on the lights and the noise, and walked straight out of the ballroom into the cool night air. The game had started again, but this time I wasn't the target. I was the one holding the door open for them to run straight into the fire. The heavy rain hit my face the moment I stepped out of the estate's glass doors. Water soaked through my hair and flattened the fabric of my dark gown, but I didn't stop. I walked down the grand marble steps, leaving the bright chandeliers and the faint sound of music behind me. In my past life, I would have been frantic. I would have run to my car, sobbing, calling every family lawyer in my contact list to figure out how to clear my name. I would have tried to save my reputation, my inheritance, and my place at the table. This time, I left every single thing behind. My title, my family allowance, my key cards to the estate, none of it mattered. The only thing I held tightly against my chest was my small, waterproof leather bag. Inside was an encrypted flash drive containing the raw, unfiltered financial logs of Stevenson Global. I knew what those files contained. Alfredo thought he was stepping into power, but he was actually taking over a hollow shell. His father's reckless offshore investments had put the company $500 million in the red. The lenders were ruthless, predatory, in waiting for the right moment to strike. In my past life, Alfredo had hidden those debts until after our wedding, forcing me to co-sign the refinancing loans so my personal family trust would act as collateral. When the ship sank, I was the one dragged under. Not this time. I reached the bottom of the long driveway near the iron gates, the rain pouring down harder now, washing away the heat of the ballroom. I stood by the curb, watching the water rush down into the drain. I had no driver, no umbrella, and nowhere officially left to go, yet I had never felt lighter. A pair of bright, clean headlights cut through the dark sheets of rain. A sleek black Maybach rolled to a slow, smooth stop right in front of me. The rear door didn't open immediately. Instead, the driver's side door opened, and a large man in a dark suit stepped out holding a wide black umbrella. He didn't say a word. He simply walked around the car, popped the umbrella open over my head, blocking the freezing downpour, and pulled open the rear passenger door for me. I looked through the open door into the dimly lit interior of the car. Sitting in the leather seat, a glass of dark liquor resting between his fingers, was Mordecai Woods. My heart gave a quiet thud. Mordecai, the man the entire city spoke of in hushed, careful tones, the undisputed king of Woods Enterprises and the fiercest rival the Stevenson family had ever faced. In my past life, I had only seen him across crowded boardrooms and high society galas. He had always been a distant, towering figure who watched the Stevenson family's downfall from afar. Right before I died in my past life, I remember hearing a rumor that Mordecai had tried to buy out Stevenson Global's hidden debt to stop Alfredo from ruining me. Back then, I thought it was just corporate gossip. Looking at him now, sitting calmly in the back of his car with his jacket unbuttoned and his eyes locked onto mine, I knew it wasn't a rumor. "You're gonna catch a cold standing out there, Miss Stafford." His deep voice cut through the sound of the rain. I didn't hesitate. I stepped inside the dry warmth of the car and slid onto the soft leather seat beside him. The driver gently shut the door, instantly cutting off the roar of the storm. The air inside smelled faintly of cedarwood and faint rain. Mordecai didn't move away. He leaned back against the seat, turning his head to look at me. His features were sharp, his dark eyes steady and unreadable as they took in my soaked hair and wet gown. "You didn't scream," Mordecai said softly, raising his glass to take a slow sip. "My people inside told me you dropped your ring straight into his glass and walked out." I pulled a dry hand towel from the side compartment, casually wiping the rainwater from my shoulders. "You have people watching my engagement party?" "I have people watching Stevenson Global," he corrected calmly. "Alfredo Stevenson is an idiot who thinks he can cover a sinking ship with loud music and expensive champagne. I was waiting to see how long it would take him to throw you to the wolves." "He didn't throw me," I said, meeting his gaze directly. A subtle, dark spark flickered in Mordecai's eyes. The corner of his mouth curved up into the faintest hint of a smile. "I know what's in that bag of yours, Marina," he said, setting his glass down in the holder. "I know Alfredo's company is drowning in $500 million of bad debt, and I know you're the only person who actually understands how his family structured those accounts." "And what do you want, Mr. Woods?" I asked, my voice steady. "Are you offering me a ride out of the rain, or are you offering me a deal?" Mordecai leaned closer, his large frame casting a shadow over me. The space between us suddenly felt very warm and very charged with an intense, quiet energy. "I'm offering you both," he whispered, his eyes dipping to my lips before rising back to meet mine. "Alfredo threw away the only valuable asset his family ever had: you. Work with me. Let me give you the resources, the security, and the platform you need. In return, help me tear his empire down to the ground." I looked at him, the power in his shoulders, the absolute confidence in his eyes. In my past life, I fought alone and died alone. In this life, I didn't need to be a martyr. I needed a partner who was strong enough to stand beside me while I set the trap. "I have conditions," I said, cleanly. "I don't want his money. I don't want his company's remains. I just want him and Regina to pay every single cent of that debt themselves." Mordecai stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached over, took a leather folder from the seat pocket beside him, and laid it open across my lap. Inside was a sleek printed agreement, a top-tier management and consulting contract with Woods Enterprises, with full legal protection and unlimited authority over the Stevenson portfolio. "Sign it," Mordecai said softly, handing me a heavy silver pen. "And tomorrow morning we start turning your stepsister's dream into her worst nightmare." I took the pen, signed my name at the bottom of the page in smooth, quick strokes, and handed it back to him. Mordecai took the folder, but as he did, his fingers closed gently around mine. His hand was warm against my cold skin, sending a strange, sharp shiver down my spine. "Welcome aboard, Marina," he said, his voice low and possessive. "Now, let's go home." 3 weeks went by faster than a breath. While the city's high society tabloids buzzed with rumors about my sudden disappearance from the Stafford estate, I was living in a luxury high-rise suite provided by Mordecai. Every morning, I woke up to a panoramic view of the skyline, working alongside Mordecai's top legal and financial teams to map out every single knot in Stevenson Global's debt structure. And just as I had anticipated, Alfredo and Regina couldn't wait to step into the spotlight. On a bright Tuesday morning, I sat at the glass table in Mordecai's private office, sipping black coffee. Across the table, Mordecai was reviewing a stack of morning papers. He didn't say a word. He simply slid the front page of the Daily Chronicle over to my side. There, printed in bold, glossy ink, was a full-page photo of Alfredo and Regina standing outside the Stevenson headquarters. Regina was wearing a massive sapphire ring, clinging to Alfredo's arm with a triumphant, teary-eyed smile. The headline read, "Stevenson Global announces new heir and upcoming wedding after Stafford betrayal." "They moved fast," Mordecai observed, his voice smooth and untroubled as he leaned back in his chair. "The press release claims Regina saved the firm from your unauthorized accounting manipulations." I skimmed the article with a small, quiet smile. "Regina has been waiting her whole life to take my spot. She thinks she just won the grand prize." "She has no idea what she's sitting on," Mordecai said, his dark eyes fixing on me with a quiet intensity. "Stevenson Global's first quarterly debt repayment is due in less than a month, $50 million in interest alone. Alfredo's father hid the debt under 5 different offshore shell companies, but the primary lenders are demanding a personal guarantor before they agree to restructure the loan. And Alfredo doesn't have the cash to pay it," I added, setting my coffee cup down with a soft clink. "In my past life, Alfredo came to me crying 2 days after our engagement party. He told me the company was facing a minor liquidity issue and needed a co-signer to secure a routine corporate loan. I trusted him, so I signed it. I didn't realize until it was too late that I had tied my personal name and my inheritance to $500 million of bad debt." "And now?" Mordecai asked, leaning forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "How do we make sure he hands that pen to Regina instead?" "We don't have to force him. We just have to feed his ego. Alfredo is terrified of looking weak. He needs to feel like the smart, powerful man in control." That afternoon, using an untraceable corporate consultant network, I discreetly leaked a modified financial summary to Alfredo's personal legal team. The file made it look like my father's family trust had officially removed me as a beneficiary following the scandal, automatically reallocating my stepdaughter inheritance portion directly to Regina. To anyone scanning the surface, it looked like Regina was about to come into a $60 million windfall the moment she officially married into the Stevenson family. It was a total illusion, a ghost account with zero liquid cash, but to a desperate man drowning in hidden debt, it looked like a lifeline.
That evening, Mordecai's internal security feed tapped right into Alfredo's private office at Stevenson Global. We watched the live monitor together in Mordecai's study. The room was dim, the soft glow of the screen illuminating our faces as we sat close on the leather couch. On the screen, Alfredo was pacing back and forth in front of his desk, looking pale and sweat-stained. Sitting on the plush couch across from him was Regina, holding a pen, looking slightly confused by the thick stack of legal documents spread out before her. "Alfredo, are you sure about this?" Regina's voice came through the crystal-clear audio feed. She sounded hesitant, picking up the top page of the restructuring agreement. "This looks like a massive corporate guarantee. Shouldn't we wait until after the wedding, or have your family's legal team review it again?" Alfredo stopped pacing, turning to her with a tense, forced smile. He walked over, sat beside her, and took her hands in his tense hands. "Regina, listen to me, Alfredo," said the voice, dripping with practiced charm. "The bank needs this signature tonight so we can finalize the new expansion deal before our wedding. Marina was too timid, too paranoid, and too weak to stand by me when things got tough. She almost destroyed this family because she didn't have the vision." Regina's chest puffed up slightly at the mention of my name. Her eyes narrowed with familiar envy. "Marina was always scared of big moves," Marina murmured. "Exactly," Alfredo lied smoothly, pressing the heavy pen into her fingers. "You aren't like her, Regina. You're strong. You're a real partner. By signing this co-guarantor document with me, you're showing the board and the whole city that you are the true lady of Stevenson Global. Once the wedding is over, your trust fund clears and we wipe the slate completely clean." Regina looked at the signature line. The words "joint and several personal guarantor" were printed in small, dark text right above the line, but her eyes were blinded by the flattery. She smiled, a proud, greedy look washing over her face. "Marina could never hold a candle to me." Without reading a single line of the fine print, she pressed the pen to the paper and signed her full name in bright blue ink. Beside me on the couch, Mordecai let out a low, dark chuckle. He reached over, taking my hand into his large, warm grip, his thumb gently tracing the back of my knuckles. "She just signed her own execution order," Mordecai whispered, his voice deep and dark in the quiet room. $500 million, fully secured against her name and whatever assets she ever touches. I looked at the screen as Regina capped the pen, completely unaware that she had just traded her freedom for a mountain of fire. "She wanted my life," I said quietly, turning my head to meet Mordecai's heavy gaze.
The annual Industrial Summit Gala was the grandest event of the season, hosted in the glass ballroom of the Grand Metropole Hotel. Every major investor, politician, and business mogul in the state filled the room. The air was warm, rich with the sound of live string music, low conversations, and crystal glasses clinking under the massive crystal lights. Alfredo and Regina made their grand entrance early, walking hand in hand down the carpeted stairs. Regina wore an elaborate silver dress covered in heavy sequins, clinging to Alfredo's arm like a trophy. They stood near the main press wall, holding court with reporters, boasting about their upcoming wedding and the alleged unprecedented growth coming to Stevenson Global. I stood near the top balcony, looking down at them. They look very confident for two people standing on quicksand, Mordecai's deep voice spoke right beside my ear. I turned my head slightly. Mordecai looked breathtaking. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair brushed back, his sharp profile carved against the soft lights of the ballroom. He didn't offer me his arm in a polite, formal way. Instead, he stepped closer, resting his large, warm hand firmly against the small of my back, a bold, protective gesture that instantly drew the eyes of every person on the balcony. I was wearing a dark, midnight blue silk dress that fell smoothly to the floor, simple and sleeveless, free of any flashy jewelry except for a pair of quiet diamond studs Mordecai had given me that morning. "Are you ready to go down?" Mordecai asked, his thumb lightly stroking through the thin fabric resting against my waist. "I've been ready for 3 years," I said softly. We walked down the grand staircase together. The moment Mordecai Woods appeared, the low hum of conversation in the ballroom faltered. Whispers rippled through the crowd as eyes shifted from Alfredo to us. When Alfredo turned and saw me, his entire body go stiff. His eyes widened, fixing on my face, then dipping down to Mordecai's hand resting possessively on my waist. The proud smile on his face vanished, replaced by a sudden, ugly flush of shock and irritation. Regina's smile froze too. Her eyes scanned my dress, my quiet poise, and the towering man standing beside me, her knuckles turning white as she squeezed Alfredo's arm. "Excuse me," Alfredo muttered to a group of reporters, pulling away from Regina. He marched straight towards us, his footsteps quick and heavy. Regina scrambled to follow him, her silver heels clicking frantically on the polished floor. "Marina," Alfredo snapped as he reached the bottom of the stairs, stopping just a few feet away. "Who gave you an invitation to this gala?" "I did," Mordecai said calmly, stepping forward just enough to put his shoulder between Alfredo and me. Alfredo looked up at Mordecai, his jaw tightening. "This is a private corporate event, Mr. Woods. Marina was dismissed from my firm for financial misconduct. She has no business mingling with our investors." "Your investors?" I stepped out from behind Mordecai, looking Alfredo dead in the eye. My voice was cool, quiet, and carried effortlessly. "Alfredo, you don't own this ballroom, and you certainly don't own the people in it. If anyone here should be worried about financial misconduct, it isn't me." Alfredo's face turned bright red. He took an angry step closer to me, his hand coming up as if to grab my wrist. "You ungrateful—" Before his fingers could even come close, Mordecai moved. In one swift, fluid motion, Mordecai grabbed Alfredo by the lapels of his suit coat, stepping into his space and backing him hard against the nearby marble pillar. The sudden move was so fast, so dark and imposing, that several nearby guests let out sharp gasps. "Lay a hand on her," Mordecai whispered, his voice dropping into a low, terrifying growl that sent a chill through the air. "And I will buy your family's name tomorrow morning, just to bury it in the dirt." Alfredo choked back his words, his eyes wide with genuine fear as he looked into Mordecai's dark, unblinking gaze. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. Regina rushed up, grabbing Alfredo's arm, her voice trembling. "Mr. Woods, please, this is a public event. You can't do this." Mordecai released Alfredo's jacket with a sharp flick of his wrist, smoothing his own cuffs as if nothing had happened. Alfredo stumbled back, gasping for breath, clutching his collar. I took a step forward, looking past Alfredo's pale face, straight at Regina. "Congratulations on the engagement, Regina. You really fought hard to take my place. I hope you enjoy every single second of what's coming next."
What is that supposed to mean? Regina hissed, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and sudden doubt. It means... I leaned in close, speaking softly so only the two of them could hear. Enjoy your bride, Alfredo. You earned every piece of her. Without waiting for a response, I turned and placed my hand in Mordecai's offered palm. He wrapped his fingers firmly around mine, guiding me away toward the VIP lounge, leaving Alfredo and Regina standing in the middle of the room, under the stares and whispers of the city's highest elite.
3 days before the grand wedding, my phone vibrated on the glass coffee table in Mordecai's penthouse. I picked it up and saw Regina's name flashing on the screen. Across the room, Mordecai was sitting at his dark wooden desk, reviewing a stack of fresh bank notices. He looked up, his dark eyes locking onto mine as I held up the phone. "Put it on speaker," he said softly. I tapped the screen and set the phone down. "Marina," Regina's voice came through, dripping with fake pity and sharp, gloating arrogance. "I just wanted to call and check on you. I know you must be feeling terrible, sitting all alone in some cheap rental, while Alfredo and I prepare for the wedding of the century." I leaned back against the plush armchair, keeping my voice low, hesitant and slightly wavering, just enough to sound defeated. "Why are you calling me, Regina?" I asked, forcing a faint, defensive quiver into my tone. "Haven't you taken enough from me?" A loud, mocking laugh came through the speaker. "Ha! I didn't take anything, Marina. Alfredo chose me." He realized who the real woman was. "In 3 days, I'm signing the final papers to merge our family accounts into Stephenson Global. I'm taking over the entire corporate restructuring team." "Regina, stop," I said quickly, letting out a sharp, fake gasp. "Listen to me. Don't sign those final restructuring papers." "Oh?" Regina sneered, her voice brightening with sudden delight. "And why shouldn't I?" "Because it's too much," I pleaded, lowering my voice as if I were giving away a secret I was desperate to hide. "Handling Alfredo's corporate accounts is dangerous. It's too much pressure for you. The legal language in those refinancing documents is complicated. It's a trap for anyone who doesn't understand high finance. You should let Alfredo handle the bank signatures alone. Leave the money to him." There was a long silence on the line. I could almost hear the venomous wheels turning in Regina's head. To a woman driven entirely by envy, my warning didn't sound like advice. It sounded like terror. It sounded like I was terrified of her taking total control of the Stephenson fortune. "You really think you're the only one who understands business, don't you?" Regina said, her voice dropping into a cold, vicious hiss. "You're just jealous, Marina. You're terrified that once I sign those final papers, I'll be the sole mistress of the Stephenson empire, and you'll have nothing left." "Regina, please, I'm trying to tell you." "Save your fake concern," she snapped, cutting me off completely. "I'm meeting Alfredo's bank representative in 1 hour. I'm signing every single binding document, and I'm making sure my personal name is tied to every major asset in that firm. You can watch from the gutters while I take everything that was supposed to be yours." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen for a second, before a slow, quiet smile spread across my face. Across the room, Mordecai let out a low, smooth laugh. He stood up from his desk, walking over to where I sat. He stopped right beside my chair, leaning down until his face was just inches from mine. "You played her like a violin," Mordecai whispered, his fingers gently brushing a loose strand of dark hair away from my cheek. She's sprinting straight into a $500 million wall, and she thinks she's winning a race. She's been obsessed with taking my scraps since we were kids, I said softly, looking up into his dark, steady eyes. I just gave her the biggest scrap of all. The final debt execution documents were delivered to Alfredo's bank 20 minutes ago, Mordecai said, his hand sliding down to rest against the side of my neck, his thumb tracing my jawline with quiet, intoxicating warmth. The moment she puts her pen to that paper, the lenders will trigger the 30-day default clause. The trap closes the second they say I do. And Alfredo? I asked, my heart beating a little faster at the closeness of his touch. Alfredo is so blinded by his own arrogance that he has no idea the bank modified the clause yesterday, Mordecai murmured, his lips brushing against my temple. He thinks he's using her trust fund. He doesn't know she has no trust fund, and the bank knows it too. I closed my eyes for a second, enjoying the quiet strength of his hold. In my past life, I was constantly running, constantly trying to fix things for people who wanted to destroy me. Now, standing in the shadow of Mordecai's immense power, I didn't have to run anymore. In 3 days, I whispered, opening my eyes to meet his, we watch it all burn. The morning of the wedding was bright, clear, and utterly cold. St. Jude's Cathedral stood like a stone giant in the center of the city, its high stained glass windows throwing sharp rays of colored light across the polished wooden pews. The air inside smelled of heavy incense, expensive perfume, and fresh white roses lined up along the central aisle. The city's highest society filled every row: politicians, CEOs, high court judges, and endless news reporters clicking their cameras from the rear balcony. Everyone wanted a front row seat to watch the union of the year. Mordecai and I arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony started. As we walked down the side aisle toward the front row, a sudden hush fell over the guests. Heads turned, whispers broke out, and camera shutters snapped softly in the background. I wore a floor-length tailored velvet dress in the deepest shade of midnight blue. Beside me, Mordecai was a picture of dark, commanding authority in a custom black three-piece suit. He kept his hand firmly resting on the small of my back, guiding me into the VIP front pew reserved for high-profile investors, a seat he had quietly bought out 2 days prior. I sat down, my posture straight, my face completely smooth. I took a slow breath, letting the steady hum of the cathedral organ wash over me. At precisely 11 o'clock, the organ music swelled into a grand, triumphant march. The heavy doors at the back of the cathedral creaked open. Alfredo stood at the altar, looking tense and restless in his white tuxedo jacket, his hands tucked behind his back, his fingers twitching slightly as he kept scanning the crowd. He looked exhausted, the skin under his eyes dark despite the heavy makeup trying to hide it. His eyes caught mine for a fraction of a second, a flash of deep, unsettled panic darting across his face before he forced his gaze back toward the entrance. Down the aisle walked Regina. She looked radiant, floating down the white runner in a massive, sweeping lace ball gown covered in tiny, sparkling crystals. Her smile was wide, proud, and triumphant. As she passed my row, her eyes cut sideways, locking onto mine. Her chin went up a fraction of an inch, her eyes screaming a silent message, "Look at me. I won." I didn't blink. I didn't scowl. I simply offered her a soft, polite nod. Regina reached the altar, stepping beside Alfredo. She took his hands, her chest rising and falling as the priest stepped forward, opening his heavy black book. "Dearly beloved, The priest's voice echoed through the vast cathedral arches, deep and melodious. "We are gathered here today in the sight of God in this congregation to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Beside me, Mordecai reached down under the wooden ledge of the pew. His large, warm hand closed around mine, his thumb rubbing smooth, slow circles against my skin. His pulse was steady, a rock of quiet strength in the middle of the storm. "The time is 11:15, Mordecai whispered, his voice so quiet it barely carried past my ear. "The bank's automatic default notice was triggered 5 minutes ago." I kept my eyes fixed on the altar. "Into this holy estate these two persons present come now to be joined," the priest continued, his voice ringing out cleanly. "Therefore, if any person can show any just cause why they may not lawfully be joined together, let them speak now, or else hereafter forever hold their peace." The cathedral went dead silent for a brief, heavy beat. The priest took a breath, turning his head to begin the vows. "Alfredo, do you take—" Bang! The sound was sharp, heavy, and echoed like a gunshot through the high stone ceiling. The massive wooden front doors of the cathedral were slammed wide open, crashing against the stone walls. The organist's hands slipped off the keys with a terrible, jarring screech. Every single guest in the pews gasped, turning their heads around in shock. Heavy, rhythmic footsteps echoed off the marble floor. A group of 6 men in dark, identical charcoal suits marched straight down the central aisle. At the front of the group walked a tall man with graying hair, holding a thick leather briefcase in one hand and a bright yellow federal enforcement folder in the other. Behind them followed 4 uniformed police officers, their boots striking the floor with rhythmic, undeniable force. "What is the meaning of this?" Alfredo's father shouted from the front row, jumping to his feet, his face red with sudden rage. "This is a private religious ceremony. Get these people out of here." The lead man in the charcoal suit didn't even look at him. He stopped right at the foot of the altar, pulling a set of heavy, stamped legal documents from his folder. "Alfredo Stevenson and Regina Boyer." The lead agent's voice cut through the cathedral like a blade, amplified by the natural acoustics of the room. Alfredo's face turned from pale to ghostly white in a single second. This is a mistake. My lawyers are—" "There is no mistake, Mr. Stevenson," Agent Miller said cleanly, lifting the paper so the high-resolution legal seal was visible to the surrounding press cameras. "As of 11:10 this morning, Stevenson Global defaulted on its primary $50 million quarterly debt payment. Under the terms of the emergency restructuring contract signed 3 days ago, the entire principal balance of $500 million is now due immediately." Regina's hand dropped from Alfredo's. Her voice rose into a high, squeaking panic. "What are you talking about? We're getting married. We have a trust fund coming. Talk to Alfredo. This has nothing to do with me." Agent Miller turned his cold gaze directly on Regina. "Miss Boyer," Agent Miller said, his voice flat and terrifyingly clear, "you are the sole registered personal guarantor on that debt." The silence in the cathedral broke into complete chaos. Reporters scrambled over pews, camera lenses flashing like lightning. Microphones were thrust forward over the wooden railings as the crowd erupted into a roar of shocked gasps and frantic whispers. "What do you mean, sole guarantor?" Regina shrieked, her voice cracking as she grabbed Agent Miller's arm. "That's impossible! Alfredo told me I was signing an expansion deal. I don't have $500 million. Look at him! He's the Stevenson. It's his company." "Take your hands off the federal officer, Ms. Boyer," Agent Miller said, stepping back with cold disgust. He opened the file, holding up a high-resolution photocopy of the signature page. 3 days ago, you executed a binding joint and several corporate debt guarantee. You personally attested under penalty of perjury that you held controlling assets in the Stafford Trust to back the loan. Regina spun around, grabbing Alfredo by his silk lapels, shaking him wildly. "Alfredo, tell him! Tell him I don't have the trust! Tell him it was a mistake!" Alfredo's eyes were wild, darting around the cathedral like a trapped animal. He shoved Regina's hands off his chest so hard she stumbled back against the altar rail, her heavy lace train tearing on the carved wood. "Get away from me!" Alfredo yelled, his face flushed with panic and sweat. "You lied to me, Regina. You told me you had the inheritance. You said you had $60 million clearing this week." "You told me to sign it!" Regina screamed, her face contorting into a mess of smeared mascara and tears. She lunged at him, her manicured nails clawing at his face, leaving red scratches across his cheek. "You tricked me! You used me to save your garbage family!" "You wanted my ring," Alfredo roared, pushing her down on the marble floor. "Her greedy, stupid bitch!" The guests were standing on pews now, holding up their phones to stream the meltdown live. Regina lay on the marble floor in her ruined white dress, weeping hysterically, kicking at Alfredo's legs, while he stood over her, cursing and spitting.
I sat in the front pew, watching the spectacle with my hands neatly folded in my lap. Mordecai's arm rested behind my shoulders, his posture relaxed, his dark eyes watching the disaster with a quiet satisfaction. "They look lovely together," Mordecai murmured softly against my ear, his voice laced with smooth, dark humor. "A match made in debt." Agent Miller raised his hand, gesturing to the 4 police officers. "Secure both of them. Alfredo Stevenson and Regina Boyer, you are under arrest for bank fraud, high-level corporate forgery, and deliberate debt concealment." The metallic clink of handcuffs echoed sharply through the cathedral speakers as an officer pinned Alfredo's arms behind his back. "Wait, you can't cuff me. I'm Alfredo Stevenson," he pleaded, his voice breaking into a pitiful sob as the steel rings locked around his wrists. Beside him, another officer pulled Regina up from the floor, snapping handcuffs over her lace-gloved wrists. Her veil tore completely off her head, falling onto the dirty runner. As the officers dragged them down the central aisle, Alfredo's frantic eyes scanned the crowd. He caught sight of me sitting serenely beside Mordecai, looking untamed, untouched, and utterly victorious. "Marina!" Alfredo cried out, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Marina, help me! You know the auditors. Tell them I didn't know. Marina, please! I love you. It was all Regina's fault." Regina turned her head, her face pale and streaked with black tears, glaring at me with raw, venomous hatred. "You did this. You knew. You told me not to sign it because you knew I would." I didn't say a word. I simply lifted my champagne glass, taken from a passing tray earlier, and held it up in a silent, calm toast as they were paraded past the flashing cameras and out into the waiting police cars. The heavy cathedral doors swung shut behind the police escort, cutting off the noise of the flashing cameras and the crowd's frantic chatter. Outside, a light, cool rain began to fall. I stood at the top of the grand stone steps, pulling my dark velvet coat tightly around my shoulders. Down at the curb, 2 black police cruisers pulled away into traffic, their red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Through the dark glass of the back window, I could see Alfredo with his forehead pressed against the seat, weeping,
while Regina sat beside him, screaming at the officer in front. In my past life, this was where my story ended, ruined, alone, and blamed for crimes I never committed. This time, I was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at the wreckage they had built for themselves. "Are you warm enough?" Mordecai's deep voice broke through the quiet air behind me. He stepped up beside me, pulling his heavy wool coat off his shoulders and draped it over mine. The scent of cedarwood wrapped around me instantly, taking away the chill of the rain. His large, warm hand rested against my back, pulling me close against his side. "I've never been warmer," I said softly, looking up into his dark, steady eyes. "Stephenson Global's assets will go to public auction by Monday morning. I've already instructed my legal team to buy their core logistics network for 10 cents on the dollar. We're renaming the division." "What are you calling it?" I asked, a subtle smile touching my lips. Mordecai looked down at me, his gaze intense, heavy, and completely unreadable to anyone else, but clear as crystal to me. "Stafford Enterprises," he whispered. "You built their systems, Marina. It's time your name was on the building." I turned to face him fully, resting my hand against the lapel of his suit. "And what about Alfredo and Regina?" "Their trial starts in 2 months. Between the federal bank fraud charges and the offshore debt default, neither of them will set foot in high society ever again. They will spend the next 20 years paying off a ghost debt they created out of their own greed." He reached down, his strong fingers lifting my chin so I was forced to look directly into his eyes. There was no coldness left in his face, only a fierce, dark devotion that sent a deep, quiet thrill through my chest. "You gave them every chance to walk away," Mordecai whispered, his face dipping closer to mine. "You warned her. You handed him his freedom. They chose their own ruin." "I just stepped out of the way," I murmured against his lips. "And you stepped right where you belonged," he said softly. Mordecai pulled me into his arms, leaning down to kiss me right there on the cathedral steps. The kiss was deep, slow, and possessive, a promise carved in cold rain and ironclad strength. When he finally pulled back, the sky above us was beginning to clear, pale sunlight breaking through the dark storm clouds. Below us, his sleek Maybach pulled up to the curb, the driver stepping out to open the door. Mordecai took my hand, locking his fingers firmly with mine as we walked down the stone steps together. We didn't look back at the cathedral. We didn't look back at the crowd. We stepped into the warm leather interior of the car, the door shutting out the past forever, leaving the ruined legacy behind to build an empire of our own. And that is how you hand someone their own undoing on a silver platter. If you enjoyed this sweet, calculated revenge, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story release. Tell me in the comments below, what would you have done if you were in Marina's shoes? See you in the next episode.